Mr. Cowrie?
Through the mayor, just for clarification, there is a grant for that. It doesn't cover the total cost of court security. It's a small portion towards that that's shared between municipalities that have courts. But there are some additional avenues as far as he is right that the legislation would have to change. The legislation's been like that since well into the early 90s. There are some other options that could be pursued by the municipality that just haven't been explored yet.
Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Sorry, Your Worship.
That's okay. We should be moving at some point, though. Thank you.
Yep, just and Ray just tweaked on an interesting point, is that we as a lower tier government are stuck with it, Napanee. But I'd be interested to find out what a municipality like the city of Brampton that is part of the upper tier government, and they're responsible for the courthouses that are in Brampton and as well as the courthouses in Mississauga. Is that something that is looked after by the upper tier, or is it looked after by the city of Mississauga and the city of Brampton? Because the region of Peel is the region of Peel. It hasn't been separated. Even though there's two separate cities, they're classified as the upper tier government, which is the region of Peel. So I'd be interested as to whether or not the upper tier government is involved in the paying for the courthouses, or is it simply the city of Mississauga and the city of Brampton? If that makes any sense at all.
It does, yeah. Through the mayor, Councillor Richardson, actually each jurisdiction across the province you'll find has different shared use agreements between the upper and lower tiers. In some cases, actually, all of policing has been moved to the upper tier, where in other areas they have different agreements in place for shared use, depending even when there's OPP detachments and local police forces, where they have agreements to which service is providing which service to whom. That there are a number of shared use agreements that we can explore across the province.
Okay, it certainly is different, and to put it to the upper tier after December the 9th, I'd vote for that. Won't be warden anymore. I'm kidding. Did you wish to say anything?
Madam Mayor, it'd be very unusual for me to ask a question at a council meeting, but I do, just for a point of clarification, because there's something that's been outstanding that came up from Councillor Norrie's remarks with regard to the 401, and maybe the detachment commander, since he's here, could answer that, is going back a few years ago, there was a lot of discussion with regard at the local level whether or not there was costs from the OPP that were incurred by the local municipality. And the 401 is certainly policed by the OPP, which is a provincial jurisdiction. Within the detachment, though, maybe the detachment commander can just speak to how calls are classified. So when the 401 is closed and all the detour routes that have to go through our municipality, and whether the officers that need to be responding to calls within the municipality are still called back, are still coded back to the provincial, or whether that there was a time when they were being coded back to municipality to man the detour routes if there was issues at intersections and things like that. Whether that's changed or whether that just falls under our base service.
So I think what you're asking is if, we took half a dozen officers and put them on at intersections to direct traffic through EDR. The cost, of course, as you know, with the new billing model, it's not tied to FTEs. So what they do, or whether we bring officers in from neighboring detachments to assist, those hours wouldn't be billed to you directly. They're just part of our policing, our FTEs provided to do the policing for this area. So there would be no, I have to say, in full disclosure, if there was another collision on a site through the EDR, then that would be billed to the municipality. But again, you're being billed for one call for service, one collision. You wouldn't be billed for the duration of the whole event.
Okay. No, thanks, Inspector. So, good conversation. Sergeant Key, thank you so much. It's been informative. I'm sorry about some of the not being able to hear us all the time. This is a new setup for us too, so we're trying to get used to it. But I thank you for being part of this evening's. It's one of our largest costs, and as you can see, this council is looking for any way that we can to try and keep our level of service up, but at the same time, try and reduce our costs. So I do thank you for coming in tonight, and I have a feeling that this conversation is far from over. So you'll certainly be hearing from us again. I'm sorry you couldn't be here in person, but maybe the next time, God willing. With that, if there are no further questions, I would look for a motion to note and receive Sergeant Key's report. Sorry, I saw hands. Councillor Richardson and Councillor McCormack. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. 6.3.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yes, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
I could say safe home, but he's probably there already. I need a resolution for council to accept additional deputations with no notice if required. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor McCormack. This is on this evening's agenda because it is part of our regular. So I'm hoping that there aren't 25 deputations that are waiting to come in, but I know everybody's been sitting on tender hooks waiting for this opportunity. So we'll try and entertain as many as we can, but we do have a very long agenda ahead of us yet this evening. So I would ask those that are coming in for deputations to try and state what they would like to talk about. Try and stick to one subject, and we'll give you as many answers as we can. And here to anoint our new system is the infamous Randy Wallach. Welcome, Randy. Thanks very much for coming tonight.
No problem. I just got one quick question I wanted to ask in person, because the last time it was $70 for me to phone in, so I don't want another $70 phone bill. I just wondering if the town's decided on how they're going to proceed with Halloween and Santa Claus Parade.
I'll answer a little bit of that, but we do have certainly Mr. Zatterberg here, whose department runs that. My opinion, my humble opinion is that we have nothing to do with Halloween. We could not cancel it. We don't have the power to do that unless somebody's got powers that I don't know about. I think it will be up to parents, up to schools, up to individuals as to decide how comfortable they are with sending children out. There have been some very inventive ways. It's not very far away, but we're not nearly through this bubble yet. So, Randy, we're not going to cancel that. And if I could go to Mr. Zatterberg to get the answer to your second question.
Your Worship, as I had indicated in an email to Council, I guess it was last week, there will be an item coming forward in the next service area update that there will not be a Santa Claus parade this year, and that we are working with the BIA to come up with some kind of alternative. So far, there hasn't been anything yet that is viable given the health unit rules, but we're still working with them.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Zatterberg. Randy, the biggest problem with any of these is gathering a crowd.
Yeah.
And that's, even though it'll be pretty poor, because we have one of the best nighttime parades in all of this area. And you and I both know how crowded it is.
Yeah, I know.
Doesn't matter whether it's 50 below, those germs will spread, and we don't know who would come from outside the area because everybody else has now canceled theirs. So I'm sure Mr. Zatterberg and his crew will come up with some alternative.
So, but, okay.
Okay,
That
thanks.
was it. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, stay safe.
Bye.
Anybody further coming up? No, that's it? Okay, a motion to note and receive unscheduled deputations moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Norrie. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you so much. 7.1, adoption of the minutes from the special session of council, September 22nd, to be adopted as presented. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Pennell. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. that the minutes of the special session of council dated October the 1st be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Richardson, Councillor Norrie. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. And as well for the minutes of the special session of council October the 8th be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor McCormack, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kaiser. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Correspondence for information.
Motion to receive.
Motion to receive by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Pennell. Comments, questions? All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Correspondence for action. Brian Windover, gating off closed road allowance. Council, did you wish to direct some questions to Peter? Did you want to have a discussion? I'm sure that you've all had time to absorb the request. Peter, would you like to speak to this before we discuss it, or how would you like to handle this?
Is everybody aware of what's down there now for barricades? That was really what I was gonna update council on.
Okay. Is everyone aware of what is down there for barricades at the time being, and a little bit of the history of why that road's even there and in the way that it is? Yes? No?
Yeah.
Yes? Everybody's aware of it? So Mr. Windover, of course, not Mr. Windover, of course. Mr. Windover is requesting that it is a full gated with a combination lock. Council, discussion, your wishes? Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, Worship. Were we going to ask for a report to come back on this, or do you want to discuss it now? I mean, I got a quick question that I would like to ask with respect to the road allowance. Basically, which is, does Mr. Windover have access to that road allowance from private property, or is his only access to that road allowance from the county road or from Bathurst Street?
Yes to both. I'm right there, Peter. His only access is that to get to his fields, yes?
Okay, so he has to access it from a main throughway then?
At this point in time, I see where you're going, though.
Okay. No, thank you. That's all I have, so.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor McCormack, and then I'll go to Councillor Pennell.
So I think, Your Worship, we need to have some public input. I'd like to support where we can, if it makes sense, but I know that there are other residents that are not in favor of this.
Okay.
And we seem to be not progressing on this too quickly, COVID taken into account and all that. But at some point, I think we have to invite those that have questions or concerns about what we're considering, and make a decision based on the information that comes back to us. But at some point, hopefully resolve this. And whatever we do here is going to dictate how we're going to handle other requests, I believe.
Yeah. Mr. Cowrie, did you wish to add to that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, just for council's information, at the most recent county TAC meeting, this has been an issue, and it was discussed as far as what other municipalities currently have in place. And my understanding from those discussions was that what is in place is very much piecemeal in the neighboring municipalities as well, and they're incurring very similar problems. The TAC committee was trying to develop some common ground to be able to present back to the local municipalities as far as creating an approach that made sense sort of across the board. And certainly with that, a full report could come forward with a full public consultation. And we realize that this has been ongoing, and it seems to be taking some time. But I know even as recently as the most recent TAC meeting, they were discussing where the similarities or differences and what the problems were in other municipalities around us that are incurring the same problems. So they are working on it.
So do you wish to make that by way of motion? We do have a recommendation here that that's exactly what happens, but would you like to add something to that, Councillor McCormack?
Well, Your Worship, I guess the motion would be that we continue to exercise whatever due diligence is required, and any input from TAC or other committees is going to be helpful, but it's something that needs to be taken care of. We need to make a decision on this, hopefully within the not-too-distant future.
So did you want to put a timeline on that then?
Well, let's say 2020.
That's the year we're in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that there is a solution by 2020.
I understand these things, they take time. It's frustrating for those that are involved. And the public input's been difficult under the circumstances, this being our first in-person meeting. But hopefully, if things stay the same in the next several weeks, we'll be able to get some public input and make a decision on this.
Okay, so you've made that by way of motion with, that it's completed before the end of the year. The staff recommendation sits here, assessing the need for a town policy with input. I don't know how we're gonna handle the whether we advertise for input. You know, what radius do you go to talk to people, to get those that really should be putting the input in? But that's gonna have to be your decision as part of this resolution. I think we need to cover everything. How did you want to deal with public input?
Well, the same as with zoning bylaw applications, if we advertise and through word of mouth, those people that are directly adjacent to these entrances.
Yep.
I don't believe that we have to speak to people that are living, 10 miles away that never drive down that area.
Yep.
These are the farmers that need access, and we need to find a solution. We've had, our fire trucks down there extricating people that drive down these roads following their GPS, and it's been expensive. We're lucky that nobody's been injured so far, but I think there's a simple solution here, but we just need to get to the bottom of it.
Yep, and set the right precedent. Okay, so do you have that, Susan? Moved by Councillor McCormack. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Richardson. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I did have a discussion.
I'm sorry,
regarding
Councillor
this.
Pennell, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna go and say, before Mr. Cowrie mentioned about the TAC committee, which is good, so I would be definitely in favor of looking forward to seeing some kind of report back from them. Of course, by doing this, we would be setting precedents, but then again, we would see what we were just talking about, how we would set a policy on this. My concern is, and I appreciate that Mr. Windover did provide us with a quotation on this, but it's very vague. And so I was just going to comment on this, that we would need to do a better staff report or something to get in there, find out exactly where these gates would be mounted so that people could still walk around them, because I'm quite sure that additional poles and supports would have to be put in place that are not included on this quote. But other than that, now that we heard that there's other communities looking into this, and that the TAC committee is looking into it, I'd be satisfied with supporting the motion. Yes, that's all I need to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize for overlooking. I'm used to looking at this screen. It's got all these little Hollywood squares in it, and it's getting difficult to watch you live and in person. We voted on that. We had everything. Okay, thanks, Susan. 8.2.2, Limestone District School Board. Recommendation for crossing guard on County Road 8 near Southview Public School. We have public comments from Southview Public School Crosswalk, County of Lennox and Addington Technical Advisory Committee for the assessment of pedestrian crossover. You have a recommendation that council received for information the correspondence from the Limestone District School Board dated October the 7th, the County of Lennox and Addington Technical Advisory Committee, information regarding the pedestrian crossover, and the public comments regarding the Southview Public School crosswalk. And further, that council provide any direction to staff regarding this matter. Before we start the conversation, and we had, I spoke to Susan, this is Madam Clerk's bailiwick with crossing guards and so on. We have had which is not a deterrent, but it certainly doesn't make it easy, Susan, how long have we had an ad going for crossing guard? Because we're short one within the municipality already.
So I believe we've been advertising over 2 months now for the one vacant position.
Any applications?
We've had one.
Okay. So, and we're short in what we need to supply already for Prince Charles.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, discussion. Oh, sorry, Mr. Cowrie, you wish to speak to it first, okay.
Madam Mayor, I thought I would give one more little piece of information for council that they may want to address in their conversation discussion. There was a idea put forward, there was a conversation with regard to education of the crosswalk, because obviously we don't have very many crosswalks in our community, and education became an issue. So one of the things being investigated was obviously a large PR campaign about how crosswalks work, and that has started. It was on the radio today. It started on the radio with some good public service announcements. There was also a conversation with regard to actually having either staff or people attend the site and actually stop every car that crosses through that area on a period of 1 or 2 days, in the morning and in the afternoon, and actually do a handout saying this is what this means, this is how you stop, this is what it was. That had received some initial support from the county, from the traffic management officer, Scott Woodburn, and there was some discussion about how to make that actually work for a period of time. Today there was some additional discussion that I just received, actually some emails with regard to some discussion whether or not with the initial campaign that's gone out, whether they should let that work first before they look at an actual campaign of stopping every car and doing that. And there's just some mixed discussion whether or not it would still be the right time to continue on with the program as far as doing that next step to basically, and the idea was on a couple of days to catch all the car movements that would normally go through that intersection either first thing in the morning or at the end of a school day, either on 1 or 2 days. But that was another opportunity to try and do additional public education to see if that is the issue, because that seems to be one of the major issues. Is just that we don't have a lot of these, so actually getting people educated. But so whether council or not believes that's a good idea, there is some discussion right now whether that should go ahead or not. So I thought that might be part of what you want to discuss.
Okay. Councillor McCormack.
Worship, back with the OPP, didn't we bring in some additional auxiliaries last year?
Not that I'm.
No, I thought we had done a recruitment program.
It would fall outside their.
Pardon me?
It would fall outside their mandate for an auxiliary.
So because the inspector isn't on a mic, they would, Councillor McCormack had asked the question regarding auxiliary police, but it would fall outside what duties they would be assigned, plus most of the auxiliary work as well, so it might be inconvenient. Certainly that's something that I know that the inspector has looked at to see if that could be done.
I was just thinking more visibility for a period of time. The traffic in the morning and, you know, when school breaks, most probably a large majority of the traffic is the same on a daily basis. Possibly just some visual impact to have people pay more attention to the crosswalk in that area might help slow people down. It's just a thought.
There has been quite a bit of proactive work done at that intersection with cruisers being visible and doing traffic enforcement. So we have been doing quite a bit of proactive.
They certainly couldn't be much more visible. I've spent, I think now, 9 different mornings up there myself just to watch. I go to the apartment house and I just sit and watch, because I'm doing a count as to who's coming across the crosswalk, how they're crossing, and the cars that are going past. And there's always been at least one cruiser there every single morning. I haven't gone up in the afternoons when they're released, but it's a busy spot right now with people not wanting to send their kids on buses. So the drop-off, which has always been tremendous, is probably sometimes to turn left into Golf Course Lane, they're backed up beyond the crosswalk. So it's, and how long that'll go on for, I don't know. It's not gonna be an easy fix. First priority is safety, but it has to be something that's available and available right now. Council? Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. Considering what you had said about the challenges we're having filling a vacancy in the cross-off positions now, one of the letters that came forward suggested that the parent council at the school was willing to help participate. And I don't know what the legalities are of allowing them to be involved, but can we support that procedure as a first step, not as a permanent solution, but perhaps just as a first step? Is there any way we can work with that?
They have been more than willing, and I'm sorry to take over this conversation, but I guess I've been more involved than the rest of council in it, because they reached out and touched me and had me up there. But the Board of Education and the school itself does not want the parent council involved because of the liability and because they're not trained to do it. So no matter what way, just because the world is a place that likes to sue the batoot off everybody, that's what's happened.
Yeah.
The most important thing, I really like the idea of stopping the traffic with the handouts, and would be quite willing to help, and I'm sure we've got other people that would help too that are on council. But every avenue has really been, other than a crossing guard, which is just not available. So I'd be happy to go, to try and see if we can't do more as far as publishing it. But good God, there are signs at the bottom of the golf course hill. There are signs, northbound and southbound that say everything except slow down, and that you must stop. And I just think that it is such a busy spot right now that people are just maybe not watching as much as they should. They're trying to get somewhere too. So we just need to give some direction to, staff. Sorry, Terry?
Thank you, Your Worship. I made a notation on my agenda for tonight is let's just hire a friggin' crossing guard. I can remember 50 years ago when I walked to Prince Charles Public School, and the crossing guard, albeit not the same one, they had a crossing guards at the stop sign to walk, and we're talking about a street that has a stop sign on each end of it. And the traffic hasn't got the ability to go fast at Prince Charles Public School, and yet we're struggling with trying to put, and I'll be quite honest with you, I don't like that intersection. I don't like where they put the entrance to the school. It's going to take some time to educate our community, and the only way to educate our community is to have a live person standing there with a sign as big as they can hold and telling people to stop. I don't know what the liability issues we have for having citizens stopping traffic. I've got experience at it, but I don't know if a lot of people do. And wading out into traffic, if you're not trained and you don't have the experience, is a very dangerous thing to do, because you think the people see you and you think that the people are going to stop, but they don't.
Just like the people crossing the crosswalks right now.
Just like the people crossing the crosswalks right now. So I would like to see at least the effort put in to try and hire somebody. I think if we put it out there to the community that we are willing to spend the money to put a crossing guard there, we need some applications to come in, and put it out that way. But my biggest fear is something's going to happen there. And like I say, I travel that chunk of road, if not daily, very close to daily, and it just scares me every time I go by there. So I would like to see a real live person, trained, liability looked after, to try and enforce traffic there. I mean, and thank you to the OPP for doing what they do, because I know they're out there, but it's the same as everything else, is that you can sit in that fishing hole with the radar and you'll slow the traffic down for a while, but 2 hours after you're gone, they're doing it again. So
and we have to cover such a short.
I would like to see some effort put into trying to hire somebody. If
I'll
we,
go to Councillor McCormack and then Councillor Pennell, and then I'll come back to you if you wish to do that by way of resolution, and we'll keep our fingers crossed.
So, Your Worship, in the interim, while we're trying to find a crossing guard, maybe we could coordinate a fire services boot drive if you want to stop traffic and speak to people one-on-one. So that'll slow traffic down, give you an opportunity to speak to the people and make some money for a good cause.
Councillor Pennell.
Through your worship, I'll just maybe make a comment on that. I wouldn't want to confuse the issue of what we're actually doing, but although it's a good idea, I would. One thing I've learned throughout my career is how do you get the message out? And the message cannot always just be one medium. So I like what Mr. Cowrie has said about having a stop campaign. Possibly we could afford some additional time on our OPP billing to have similar to a ride program where the cruisers are there and they're stopped. I mean, we look at the report from Mr. Wager, and the flashing lights are over half a kilometer one way and almost a kilometer the other way. I'd like to see that go on with the training, and I'm quite sure too that there's some children that need to be trained too, that you just don't push the button and run.
And parents.
And parents too, and we see that with the way our crossings are here when we turn to the new one, where you can't just, you have a time limit to push that button, and we still see a lot of people, a lot of adults and the community members walking on a red flashing hand downtown. But anyway, back to this, I would like to see the training campaign. I would like to see a stop program, because I'm quite sure majority of the people, it's the same people traveling that road at those times, but not all. Of course, there would be some other people as well. And I'd look forward to some training on crosswalks, because I too am quite confused with the crosswalks that we have here in our own town, and like to know when to stop and when not to stop. Like the one on Bridge Street, do we just simply stop because somebody's standing there, or is it during school hours only? Things like that. So definitely some great education would be needed, and I'd like to maybe start that as soon as possible, to have the stop program and whatever else is going on with My FM or in the paper or whatever the case is. I don't think that we should hold off on that. And if it is passed tonight that we look at hiring a crossing guard, we know just by conversations that's going to take some time, and we don't have that time as we read in notes and correspondence that we can't have an accident. So.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think in this issue, every measure is reasonable. And we've seen a lot of good ideas come from this table, a lot of good ideas from staff, the communications effort. I think everything is reasonable, and everything should be on the table to discuss. On the idea of hiring a crossing guard, I say take the initiative, to put it out there. In a different location for a different school, you might get somebody who has some personal tie to the student body and steps up where they wouldn't have at a different school. So I think the possibility is there, even though it may not have been successful in our other location. And so why not at least try? And that's all I want to say. Every measure is reasonable. So I think everything we should do, everything we can do, we should do.
And to give the school board and certainly the principal and staff there, they have actually taken parents and kids to the crossing to show them how it is. I was there one morning, and I'm going to bore you with the story because I bored with everybody else, because I went across the road and talked to them. Father, mother, 2 dogs, 2 kids, and a stroller. Hit the button, headed across. Never even looked north or south to see what they were doing. And his comment, the gentleman's comment, was to me, but they have to stop. The lights are flashing. Well, okay, 4-way stops. Do you really make sure that other person's going to be there? Do you really make sure that Deserano Road and 502, do you really trust everybody that's there? But the school board and the school themselves have been trying to educate too. Council's wishes here.
I'll make the motion. Yeah. I'll make the
Councillor
motion.
Richardson.
Sorry, I make the motion to try and hire a crossing guard for this location, that we advertise it, try and hire it. Someone there, like I say, it's my firm belief that we need a live, breathing person holding a sign to try and, that's the best education, and I appreciate all the other avenues that we're going to do, but the best education is to have somebody there making those people stop. And it's gonna take some time, even with somebody standing there, but I do think that's their best option at this point. Now, and then maybe I should have, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I'm gonna get a seconder, and then I'm gonna get some discussion, seconded by Councillor McCormack. And I believe, just to add to that, is I know that the TAC committee, through Chris Wager, has said that you can't have the flashing lights and a crossing guard. It's against somebody's standards, but I don't know what it is. We're not even gonna worry about that tonight, okay? Mr. Cowley.
Just for council clarification on that, through the mayor, if we're going to pursue the crossing guard avenue first, is it council's wishes then that because the crosswalk may come out if we're successful in getting a crossing guard, that we hold off on the education campaign until we know the other avenue first, just so we're not confusing the matter, or or just keep going with what we're planning?
If we can't get a crossing guard for a month or so, I think any education that we can help with and the fanfare that we can get there and show people, not that we have to show them we are making an effort, but to try and curb any kind of accident that might be there. Okay? So add to that we'll stay with the campaign as well, just in case.
Can I ask
Deputy
a point
Mayor
of
Flash.
clarification?
Yes.
Does the crosswalk have to be removed if a crossing guard is in place, or is it just not to be used when the crossing guard is in place?
I believe it's the light issue, is what Mr. Wager had said to me, that they're not usually in combination because the flashing lights take over the fact that a person is
And I
walking
respect
in.
that, but I think I would still like to ask for clarification,
Yep.
because there may be other times of the day when the crossing guard's not present, that the crosswalk may still be appropriate.
That's right. No, perfect, yeah. No, good point.
Golfers.
That's right, golfers. Okay, so are we clear on what we're voting on? Susan, you have everything that you need, other than a crossing guard. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Hospice Lennox 8.2.3, Hospice Lennox and Eddington request for support of New Horizons for seniors funding application. Council's wishes. Moved by Councilor Pennell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kaiser. Any comments or questions? Like every other charity through COVID, hospice has missed a lot of fundraising opportunities too, so I could see no hesitation in sending off a letter of support for this New Horizons application, seniors application. I've called the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Unfinished business, community and corporate services, process to alter BIA boundaries, deferred from the January 14th meeting. Whose is this? Is this yours, Susan? Okay, thank you.
So this request came forward from a business owner downtown. It was deferred in January. Provided council with a report on the process to alter the boundaries of the BIA. And Councillor Norrie, who's the representative on the BIA, may want to add to this as well. The BIA has provided their input, saying they don't wish the boundaries to be altered, but it is a bylaw of council, so it is council's final decision.
Councillor Norrie, did you wish to speak on behalf of your BIA?
Just briefly, I think we got the same email maybe, but speaking with the new office manager, or sorry, operations manager, as well as the new executive, they want it to stand as is, not to change the boundaries. They've had discussions on it, and you heard the deputation, the one in
Yeah, so that's
February,
their suggestion. That would be their wish, that they
Status
stay
quo,
as-
yes.
Okay, status quo. Council's wishes. Move to alter or move to stay? Move to stay as it is, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Any comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, thank you. 10.1, BIA recommendation for new BIA Board of Management members. You have a recommendation that council receive for information the correspondence, and further that council appoint the following persons to the BIA Board of Management for the remainder of the term of council. Christy Smith from LNA Mutual Insurance and Carrie Brockman from RBC. Council's wishes. And are we doing this legally? Yes, we are? Okay. I just know that sometimes they send us recommendations and we let them fly and maybe it's not right. But in this instance, we're okay to do it? Okay, she's smiling. Moved by Councillor Norrie, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried, thank you. We have done 11.1. So 11.2, CAO OPP contract background information. Mr. Cowrie.
Madam Mayor, unless there's questions, this information was basically provided as background to the OPP presentation that was during deputations.
Okay, so motion to receive. Any questions? Motion to receive, Councillor McCormack, Deputy Mayor Kaiser. Any questions of Ray on this report? And we also have the inspector here, of course, too, if he so wishes to be involved. Yeah. Councillor Richardson.
I apologize. I wanted to start off our last conversation, but I do respect and am very, very supportive of what the local constabulary does in this community. They are very well trained, they're very well educated, very well led in order to keep us safe. I'm very supportive of that, and I can't say that enough. The problems I do have has to do with corporate OPP. And I look at the response, first of all, I look at the response, and then the very first sentence says it was received from regional headquarters of the OPP. Yet, regional headquarters comments on the use of the Ontario Provincial Police Penitentiary Squad with respect to enforcement of the Quinte Detention Centre. The last time I checked, regional headquarters does not oversee the penitentiary squad. The penitentiary squad is overseen by the Criminal Investigation Bureau, which is run out of Aurelia. So I'm a little disheartened in the fact that regional headquarters is now, I understand the way that the policing world works, and maybe regional headquarters is simply the person that is providing the information. But I would sooner have heard from the Criminal Investigation Bureau, the director or the deputy director, or the commissioner himself on this. The Ontario Provincial Police Criminal Investigation Penitentiary Branch mandate focuses on policing, providing police investigation services for federal institutions operating in the Correctional Service of Canada. The unit was formed over 30 years ago. That's true. It was formed probably 35 years ago. But their mandate can change. I'm a little disheartened the fact that their mandate hasn't changed in 35 years. And they have the ability. What really strikes me is that we have been informed by the Ontario Provincial Police Penitentiary Squad that is not in a position to take over police investigative duties at the Quinte Detention Centre. I'd like a further explanation on that, because I think they can. I think they're trained to do that. We are very fortunate to have a penitentiary squad within our jurisdiction in which we live. They police federal institutions in the city of Kingston. They police federal institutions in Loyalist Township. They drive by the Quinte Detention Centre to process charges for the federal institutions that are in Loyalist Township. But they're not equipped or not in a position to investigate crimes that happen in the Quinte Detention Centre. I'm disheartened by that. I really think they can, and I really think they can do better. Just bear with me for a moment, Your Worship. I've got a number of notes here. I think what I'll do is I'll jump into this conversation here. I learned quite a bit today when I was on the internet. I learned that there are 4 types of correctional centers, facilities within the province of Ontario. We have a correctional center, we have jails, we have detention centers, and we also have treatment centers. A detention center, which the Quinte Detention Center is, are larger, more modern facilities built to serve the needs of several regions. It pains me that the town taxpayers in the town of Greater Napanee are paying the freight for several regions, and that hurts me. Let's look at the correctional centers, the detention centers. We've got the Elgin Middlesex Detention Center, which is in the city of London. We've got the Hamilton Wentworth Detention Center, which is in the city of Hamilton. We've got the Niagara Detention Center, which falls within Niagara Region, policed by the Niagara Regional Police. Of course, the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center is very self-explanatory, is within the city of Ottawa. We've got the Quinte Detention Center, which is situated in poor little old Napanee. The taxpayers of Napanee are forced to police the detention center. Of course, we've got the Southwest Detention Center, which is in Maidstone or Tecumseh, which is in the city of Windsor. And the rest of them are very self-evident. We've got the Toronto Intermittent Center, which is obviously in the city of Toronto. We've got Toronto South Detention Center, which is in the city of Toronto. And we've got the Toronto East Detention Center, which is in the city of Toronto. Every one of these municipalities are cities and have a much larger tax base than what we have. Yet the town of Greater Napanee is taxed with policing a facility that we're the only ones that have a facility like this that isn't a city. Now, I can go on to talk about, there are some jails. I mean, the definition of jails are older, generally smaller institutions originally established by the counties or other municipalities. So you got the Brockville Jail. You know, there was one up in Brantford, Fort Francis Jail, Kenora Jail, smaller municipalities. We are very fortunate to have a specialized unit right within our territorial jurisdiction that have the training and have the ability to investigate crimes inside the Quinte Detention Center. And I apologize to the inspector for my earlier comment. I know it wasn't fair to put you on the spot with respect to whether our taxpayers would benefit from this. I know they would. And I think that your detachment would benefit from this. That if your detachment isn't taxed with going into the Quinte Detention Center and answering the 200 calls or whatever number of calls it is, it will benefit your detachment, it will benefit our community. It just boggles my mind. And to read the response that we received from regional headquarters, and just bear with me, I had it here somewhere. That the penitentiary squad is not in the position to take over policing investigative duties at the Quinte Detention Center. That pains me. It's cost this community a lot of money, and it's going to continue to cost this community a lot of money to investigate crimes committed by persons, for the most part, aren't from this community, because the Quinte Detention Center houses a vast number of people that come from the city of Kingston, the city of Belleville, and places beyond. And it pains me that our taxpayers have to pay to deal with somebody else's problem. It just makes me mad. I'll move on to the illegal cannabis growing operations. We've had a discussion with respect to recouping some of the costs by our community that our taxpayers have paid for. the use of our trucks, the use of our equipment, the use of our people. The Ontario Provincial Police has the ability to rent trucks, and I know that for a fact because I did it. We'd take off a 4,000 or 5,000 plank row. We went to the local truck rental and rented a truck. It again, hurts me in the fact that we're spending the taxpayers' money, and I love the OPP. I support the OPP 100%. But with all due respect, their budget is a whole lot bigger than ours. And they have the ability to do what they're going to do. I'm guessing that the property that was seized under the authority of a warrant. I'm guessing that the property that was seized under probably a federal statute, if not a provincial statute, which is the mandate of the OPP. I don't mind helping out, but it's costing us money, and at a time where we just can't afford to do that right now. So there's a section in here that I just don't understand. On occasion, property found on scene is not seized by PAFU, which is the Provincial Asset Forfeiture Unit. And we asked if there was a value to the municipalities, we could seize it and have it stored while we asked the court. That's not the way this game's worked. You go in and execute a warrant. Warrants are very specific as to what you can seize and what you can't seize. Sometimes you get there, you'll find stuff that is a crime related, so you have to seize it. But this makes no sense, where we asked that if it was of value to the municipalities. The OPP isn't seizing stuff that's of value to us. And then it goes on to say something about bags of soil and fertilizer. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I apologize if I'm hurting people's feelings, but it makes no sense to me. It goes on and it talks about greenhouses, but as discussed at the Goodyear Road site, there was not sufficient time to remove them under the search warrant. If there was a need to remove these things, extensions can be applied to search warrants. That makes no sense to me, and I apologize. It just doesn't. With respect to people being charged, may not have access to pay for the restitution. I mean, since they started growing the first marijuana plant, very seldom do we ever arrest the guy that owns the property. That just doesn't happen, and will not happen unless we find the stupidest marijuana grower in the whole world. And even the stupidest marijuana grower in the whole world isn't that stupid. So I hate to sound pessimistic, but the chances of recouping costs through forfeiture are virtually non-existent. I don't know if there's a further explanation of dismantling these operations would not have been possible without the assistance of the municipalities. Of course, I mean, we all have to work together, but I have a problem with using our equipment, our people. I'm not sure if there's any liability issues, but heaven forbid one of the guys that's driving the truck or using the backhoe or whatever equipment was used gets sick from this, because if they do, where does that put us as far as liability goes? So I am excited in the fact that there's a couple of AMO advisory groups that have been established. I'm excited the fact that we may be part of them, and I think that's important. But I'm sure there's stuff I've missed because I've got marks all over these pages, but I think I've said enough. I'll allow somebody else to speak.
So out of that, do you have any action items that you wish to take forward?
With all due respect, I'd like to talk to the commissioner of the OPP or his designate and ask him if the mandate of the penitentiary squad that's been there for 35 years cannot be adjusted.
Okay. So would you like to do that by way of asking for either himself, herself, a representative, that we make our facts known, because it certainly, this I'm sure is not being broadcast in Toronto. So
I will.
So I think, and I mean that with all due respect, and it's great for us to find out what's wrong, but we need to find a way to make it, even if it's not right for everybody, it's right for us.
Absolutely. I mean, like I say, we're a small market here. And to have to police, I mean, we're not even, with all due respect, we're not even getting help from our partners in the other lower tier partners. We're footing the bill on this on our own. You know, Loyalist isn't helping, but we've got Loyalist OPP, or people working out of Loyalist that work out of the Napanee detachment, and, sorry, the Langston Eddington detachment. But we're footing the bill on this, right? And we are a small market. We're a community of what, 15,000, 20,000 people?
16,222.
16,222 of great people.
Yeah.
And I just think it's unfair for our taxpayers to be footing the bill on this, especially when we are the only really small market that has a detention center in their jurisdiction. And I say, we're not even sharing it with our lower tier partners. We're footing the bill on our own, right? And that bothers me, so.
So we have had, Mr. Calorie, oh, certainly, Inspector Sample, go ahead.
So, just if you go back to your presentation that Sergeant Key presented, and just, you know, to make the facts clear, the town doesn't pay, so a violent call for service is 16 hours. The town would not pay 16 hours. That would go into the provincial pool, and you would then pay your percentage of that, which is about 1.8% of the pool. So actually the people in Ontario are all paying for the cost of Quinte Detention Center, policed by the OPP, whether they know it or not. That's the reality of it, is that all calls for service costs go into a pool. You pay a portion of that depending on your calls for service. Calls for service at the jail will increase that percentage because it drives up the average number of calls for service. So, you know, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. My detachment is the only detachment in East Region. There's 16 detachments in East Region. I'm the only detachment that has a provincial jail. So I am unique, and I do, you know, voice my concerns within the organization about how that is policed, because it is a pressure on my resources, which are, you know, I want resources, many resources as possible available to police the community. Just like the 401, though, is a pressure on my resources. You know, I'm not going to state the obvious, the difference between the 401 and the Quinte Detention Center. I would just caution trying to, you know, and again, I know, Terry, that you have a lot of history and a lot of knowledge in the OPP, but I'm not so sure telling the OPP how they will police the jail is the conversation you want to have. More the conversation is who's going to pay for policing the jail. Because I feel, you know, if I'm staffed to do that work, there are a lot of calls there that I am better positioned to police. Whether it's people that arrive with contraband or prisoners that are coming out of the institution that have contraband, things that are happening at the time. If I'm going to wait for the penitentiary squad, they may be there, you know, that day or the next day, and that isn't an adequate response for the to ensure the safety of this community, in my opinion. I need to be engaged in what goes on over there, because we also have people that live in the broader community that have ties to that institution, and I'll let you imagine what those ties may be. So I need to be aware of what's going on there. I need to know who's being released into our community, and I need to be engaged in policing that institution. But I'm, you know, again, I'm not going to state the obvious. You know, I don't know who should pay for it, and I'll leave that up to you. As far as the cannabis, you know, if I can, because, you know, we, in my detachment in particular, LNA County, which, yeah, polices, you know, 6 municipalities, Greater Napanee being the largest, I can tell you we are in the conversation provincially because of what we've done. And a lot of that was because of what I was hearing from not just Greater Napanee, but from all the municipalities. You know, you receiving complaints from constituents about odor and having cannabis growing next door to your property or in your neighborhoods, or just the insecurity that was creating, and I felt it was necessary for us to do something. And to be quite honest with you, our organization wasn't, because of the legislation that's in play right now through the Cannabis Act, access to medical marijuana, it took a lot of pressure to get done what we did this past season. We executed 20 search warrants, not just in Greater Napanee, but in LNA County, Prince Edward County, and Hastings County. But, we here in Napanee did several. And again, it would have been beyond the scope at that time of our ability to do as many of them as we did without the assistance of all our municipal partners. And as I've said, the cost recovery for that, I think, is available. The people that should be bearing the cost of that are the people that own those properties. And I don't know if there's a way that you can impose some kind of, taxation surcharge on these people, but they brought that cost to the municipality. I live in this municipality as well. I live in Greater Napanee. I don't want to be paying for it either. But I also knew I didn't want that in my community. And so, we have also engaged with, the Ministry of Environment to ensure that they're inspecting these properties to make sure that there isn't additional costs or liability to the municipalities when these people decide that they're just going to walk away from them. And now there's a huge cleanup cost involved. So we have been doing that, and we've been encouraging them to fine the property owners if they can. But I really believe, we will include the actual costs incurred by the municipalities in the Crown briefs, and we will be asking for restitution. And as Terry's mentioned, we are dealing with low-level players here that we've arrested. These are people who were hired, to go and harvest cannabis, and they're doing it, thinking what they're doing is legal, and they're getting paid to do it, and they get arrested. Whether they knew it was legal or not, I have no idea. But what I'm trying to say is that we are working towards going after the vast majority of these properties. As far as I know, only one of them was leased. They're all owned by somebody. A numbered company, individuals have owned them, and in my estimate, in my opinion, those are the people that are responsible for the costs of cleaning up those grow operations, and that's who I would be going after. I can tell you that moving forward, because of the success of what we've done here, this will continue, and there is talk within the OPP of hiring a contractor to come in and do the removal of the organic material. And I was involved in a meeting, not that within the last couple of weeks, because of our role in this year, and with people that are doing this provincially. And I said, I would prefer that you approach the municipalities first to see if they want to do the work and be compensated before we bring in people from the outside. But that would be up to the municipality. My hopes, to be honest with you, we're not going to see a lot of these moving forward. I think the word is out. This isn't the place to grow cannabis. And that's, to me, making our community safer, and what was the objective to begin with. But I agree, there's costs, and I think we're certainly willing to work with you on trying to find ways to do cost recovery.
Thanks, Scott. Further, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two comments that I didn't quite know where to fit into this discussion tonight. But since we seem to be talking about the marijuana issue initially, one of the thoughts that had crossed my mind, and it was just alluded to, is the cost of recovery. There is an incredible amount of civic pride in our people who were able to participate in shutting these organizations down, which needs to be recognized, and I'm very thankful that they were able to do the work. The fact that it will be very long time down the road before we were able to recoup any costs from the PAFU engagement. Can we do something similar to we do with roads, where we have a memorandum of understanding with the county, so that when we help the county to maintain the roads, we are repaid those costs? Can we set up a similar situation with the OPP, so that if we are called in and we are able to help with a project like that, we have a policy in place to recoup those costs upfront, or at least within a reasonable amount of time, as opposed to waiting for assets to be sold? So that was just food for thought. I don't know if that's possible or not. The other thing that I was thinking about was with regards to the Quinte Detention Center. And I know that the way that invoices have been billed back to, not to our community, but to the province, have changed since 2017, and we are still waiting return on a credit for issues that happened before that.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have that credit addressed before we accept the expansion of the detention center? And I certainly know we need it, and I certainly know it is overpopulated right now, or usually, perhaps not right now, but usually it is very much overpopulated, and we need the expansion. Can we apply pressure to have that credit addressed before the expansion comes forward? And those are just my thoughts on that.
Well, I guess, does anyone else want to speak to this? We've addressed a lot of things tonight, and I think Terry brings some very good things. Councillor Richardson brings some interesting details that we need to dig into. As far as, I worry about recouping any costs on the marijuana as well, but I agree with what Councillor Johnson has said, is that there was a whole lot of civic pride, and I'd really like to see the amount of time and effort and legal fees and time that Michael and the planning have spent trying to shut these things down. They're gone for the time being, and hopefully they stay that way. And we have sort of gained a reputation. If these people want to set up these things in our area, they need to follow the rules. They need to be in the zoning that they need to be in. They need to be taxed as such. They need to get building permits to put these things up. They need to let us know what they're doing with wastewater, where they're drawing their water from. They just can't come in willy-nilly and do it. The idea is not bad if they're doing it legally, but they weren't doing it legally, and they were bringing undesirables, not just into Greater Napanee, but all the areas that did it. It's you know, one of those things that it's a win-win and a lose-lose, and I understand what everyone is concerned about, but somehow we have to move forward and make sure that they're not going to come into our area. Is there any further comments or questions on this? We could spend a whole day on nothing but OPP costs and how we could work together to try and improve the system. Terry, did you have anything that you wanted to put out there as to action items other than having the commissioner come and see us?
I'd like to have that conversation.
Yeah.
I'd like to have that conversation as to, Scott knows, Lord knows, I've tried to convince the OPP to do other things, and I've fallen on deaf ears, but I think it's important. We are, and I just can't reiterate enough, we are a small market here, and we are one of the number of lower tier governments that are paying for this, and that bothers me. And I'm pretty sure that if these duties are taken over by another agency, by another section of the OPP, it's gonna help your detachment, because your guys aren't going over there to deal with it. And it's the same setup that they deal with in Loyalists, is that, you know what, the OPP deals with everything that happens outside the gates, but anything that happens inside the gates is the penitentiary squad. Yeah. And I'm not sure, it's the same game, it's just a different type of institution. And with all due respect, even if they tried it as some sort of a pilot project for a year, just give it a go, see what happens, right? I mean, again, I've been around long enough to realize that I'm not going to probably change the way the Ontario Provincial Police does business. But the Ontario Provincial Police can come to us and ask to use our equipment and our manpower, and we say, yes, you know what, we got a problem here, we want to deal with it. Yet when we ask them to help us out with respect to this, we get a number of excuses why it just can't happen, and that bothers me.
Okay, so you want to make that by way of motion, that you would like Mr. Cowrie to fashion a note to the commissioner that he takes, that we will be able to have face-to-face, Zoom to Zoom, whatever it's going to be, to talk these through. Not a delegation at AMO, because we're not going to have those things again. That we need to discuss what is important to Greater Napanee, and that involves the OPP Lennox and Addington detachment. Am I right? Did I word that properly?
Yes, you did, yep.
Okay. I'll get a seconder first. Moved by Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor McCormack. Mr. Cowrie, did you wish to say something?
Madam Mayor, I just asked for some clarification from council. There's also the AMO meeting is in 2 weeks with the Superintendent of the Municipal Policing Bureau, which, with council's permission, I would start the conversation at that level to get the commissioner involved in a further conversation. But if the motion could include that as part of the discussions, we're already moving forward on the revenue front with regard to the very dated calculation used on hydro assessments. If we could also, and council had discussed that, but also formally move forward with a presentation on the very unfortunate heads and beds that's used to calculate our revenues from Quinte Detention Center as part of that. And also that as part of the continuation of contract considerations, whether or not we consider a contract moving forward, that part of that be municipal revenue chargebacks to the contract, as well as, so not only looking at the expenses that we pay for in the contract, but revenue chargebacks or revenue sources where the OPP are using our services, and how that deals with the OPP contract. In some municipalities, for instance, the municipality provides the office space, and in this case the OPP provides their own office space. But in a municipality where the municipality provides the office space, the municipality is compensated back as part of their contract for those costs, or it's not built in to the formula cost. And if council wished, we could try and pursue any of those additional, chargebacks for participation in cannabis, the use of the repeater in our municipal building, all of those things that become partial credits towards the cost of our contract. It doesn't necessarily affect the expense side, but it does affect the revenue side that comes back from the ministry directly, which may offset some of our costs. If council wished to address all three of those at the same time as part of this motion, staff would work towards those, if that makes sense.
Mover?
It does. I don't want to muddy the waters on it, that's the only thing, and I just want to make sure that anything that we address is going to be something that's well within the powers of the Ontario Provincial Police to fix. So if it's something that, as far as some of the financial stuff, if it's within their powers to fix, I have no problem with it. If it falls outside of their powers, their jurisdiction, then I would like to sort of leave that out, so.
You got direction then?
Absolutely, and certainly the revenue component for heads and beds would be outside of the OPP. That would be a ministry.
Yes.
So if council wanted to introduce that as a secondary motion later on in the meeting, that would help us address. We could then move that forward officially on behalf of council. Thank you.
So I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Did you wish to see another motion hit the floor for you to work on as well, or is that enough?
If council later on in the meeting or at some point in time wanted
Okay.
to address the heads and beds, which is actually the revenue we get, then that should be a separate motion.
You want to do it now while it's fresh?
Sure, that's
Yeah.
fine. Yes, please.
Okay. So moved by Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor McCormack. Do you have the verbiage that you need, Susan? You always do, thank you. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. I need a motion to go beyond 10 o'clock, because believe it, it's friggin' 9:48. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Pennell, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Scott, thank you so much. I don't think there's anything else on here. I do, and on behalf of council, I know we put you through the rods and so on tonight, but we do appreciate your interest and you being here.
Welcome the opportunity, and we're willing to come anytime. We've got lots of stuff to share. We can have a police services board.
I know.
Lots of challenge.
It is a bit of a challenge. Thanks so much for your time then, Scott. Do we need to note and receive that report as well from Ray? Or do you want to combine it within the other? Okay. Emergency services, replacement of self-contained breathing apparatus. Deputy Chief Koenig?
Through the mayor, I know it's been a long night so far and you've got a lot more to do, so I'll be really quick. Braden Avenue Emergency Services is looking at replacing their breathing apparatus next year, self-contained breathing apparatus. Doing some research, and we're looking at the fact that time frames that equipment's got to be replaced by August 1st of next year. And the time frames that we're looking at, basically, we wait until next year. We're looking right at August 1st. If there's any issues at all, we won't have the equipment in time. So we're looking at permission to move forward now, pre-capital approval, to put out the tender now and come back to council with a recommendation so we can order it by the end of the year to save a couple months so we can move forward with it. If there's any questions on my report?
Any questions to Deputy Chief Koenig? If not, do you have a recommendation before you? Council's wishes. Councillor Pennell?
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kaiser. Jeepers, am I getting punchy? No further conversation? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thanks very much, Deputy Chief.
Thank you.
And that was the only thing on the item, so again, with council's permission, can we excuse Deputy Chief Koenig as well?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Planning report. PLOP MA 2020-007 official plan amendment and PLZACO 2020-008 zoning bylaw amendment applications for 2868A County Road A. You have a recommendation that council receive for information. And further, that council approves the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed below, subject to the following conditions. Michael, do you have anything further to add to this?
Through your worship, staff have received no further questions or comments from the public. There were some questions from council at the previous meeting regarding some of the structures noted on the survey sketch, particularly with the covered trailer and attached deck. Staff are proposing that, pending council's approval of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, staff proposed imposing a condition on the consent application that is forthcoming to require the owner to remove the deck attached to the trailer and the roof covering the trailer to address those previous concerns. So just information for council.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Pennell?
Through worship, Michael, when we talk about removing the roof, I'm just thinking if it's leaking or something, if he was able to get a permit to build a freestanding structure and backed it up, just like a pole barn with a roof on it, then that would be, and if he got a permit for it, that would be okay?
That would be permitted.
Great, thank you.
There were no, through your worship, there were no permits on record for that structure.
Right, thank you.
Okay. Do I have a mover and a seconder? No. Moved by our councilor's wishes. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Pennell. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Infrastructure Services, Development Services, West Bridge Estates, Phase 5, final certificate of approval of the works. You have a staff recommendation that council receive for information from Infrastructure Services, Development Services, West Bridge Estate Subdivision, Phase 5, final certificate of approval of the works report, and further that council authorize the issuance of the final certificate of approval of the works of the West Bridge Estates subdivision Phase 5 following the 1-year maintenance period lapsing on October the 11th, 2020. Michael, do you need to speak to this, or does council have any questions or comments for, directed to or around Michael? If not, do you have a recommendation before you? Infrastructure Services, Richmond Village Phases 3 and 4, final certificate of approval of the works. You have a staff recommendation that council receive for information. The Richmond Village Subdivision 3 and 4, final certificate of approval of the works report, and further that council authorize the issuance of the final certificate of approval of the works for Richmond Village Subdivision Phases 3 and 4 following the 1-year maintenance period lapsing October the 11th, 2020. Council's wishes, moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor McCormack. Any comments or questions? All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Infrastructure Services, Utilities, recommendation for award of detailed design and construction contract administration for upgrades to the Napanee Pollution Control Plant. Peter and Todd.
Your Worship and Council, I'm just going to speak to the background section of the staff report just for a couple of minutes, and then I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Harvey. So basically, the background section of this staff report is basically a 10-year report card on what the utilities has done in preparation for the upcoming expansion for the plant. So provided within that background, there are some key dates when we did the class environmental assessment, some of the funding streams that we applied for that were unsuccessful, the ones that we were, those types of details are in there. Some of the key messages that I'd like to, that are included here, I'd like to expand on just a bit further is, back in 2010, the average day flow for the plant exceeded the capacity. So we've been able to make significant gains. In the report, I reference infiltration, inflow and infiltration efforts. So, I think we've reached that level where we have all that low-hanging fruit. We've regained as much capacity as physically possible, and we've got to that end of that road where we're looking at moving into expansion. That's the only viable option moving forward. There are other methods, but they're not cost effective. So to give you just an example, what one would be, foundation drains on people's houses. So, if we went in and started started enforcing that, that would be a very difficult program that would yield very low results and aggravate the general community as a whole. So there are some out there, but we've exhausted all the ones that have very quick yield. And we've taken those average day flows down. You'll see the graph in there where there's significant drops in average day flow, and at the same time we've allowed significant economic growth. So we've been able to do that. We've been able to reach over $2 million in impost reserves. We've been able to eliminate the debt for the user pay system. So there's a lot of things that we've done. We've done a lot of council approved a lot of large scale capital upgrades in preparation. These are large sensitive projects that were whether in ground or plant related that needed to be done in preparation, because when we go down this road of a debenture and we start presenting long-term financial plans to you, we don't want to be having to juggle those other large projects at the same time. So basically, yes, it's basically that 10-year report card on where we've been. There's a lot of good things in there. There's a lot of very positive trends that don't often run in those directions, and this report basically is the transfer over. So I was the project manager for this up until now. You've heard me speak. We need to expand. We need to expand. You've been hearing that from me for 10 years. We've put it off. We've put it off as long as we possibly can. Put ourselves in good position. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Harvey, and he can talk about the next steps and what the future looks like moving forward.
Thank you, Peter.
Good evening, and through your worship, I'll just discuss really the RFP process. So following the June 24th execution of the contribution agreement with Infrastructure Canada, the RFP for detailed design and construction contract administration for the upgrades was issued on July 7th. The RFP closed on August 21st. Staff were really pleased with the response. We received 6 proposals from experienced and reputable firms. The proposals were submitted in 2 envelopes, a technical submission and a price submission. Proposal approaches detailed in the technical submissions ranged significantly from refurbishing the existing facility to building a brand new facility on the adjacent lot just to the west. Our evaluation team completed independent reviews and scoring of the technical submissions, with R.V. Anderson receiving the highest technical score. It's interesting to note that all but one of our reviewers ranked the RBA proposal as the best, as the highest. The other reviewer ranked them as second. So there was some consensus among our team in regards to the best technical proposal. So that top-ranked proposal is a new liquid treatment process to the west of the existing biosolids handling facilities. And the advantages over the other submissions included anticipated capital cost savings over a retrofit scenario, complete elimination of bypass to up to the peak design flow, where the other proposals suggested there would still be partial bypasses and they would blend, but this is complete elimination. There is reduced construction risk with working on a greenfield site rather than trying to retrofit an operating plan and the complications that go along with that. So following that technical evaluation, the price envelopes were opened and scored. The low bid was approximately $2.65 million, with the high at just over 4.3. The recommended consultant was competitively priced toward the lower end at just under $3 million. So speak a little bit to schedule. Should council approve the recommendation, design work would commence in November of this year and be completed by March of 22. So it's a fairly lengthy design process, 15, 18 months. Tendering of the construction contract would be scheduled for May of 22, with a fully operational facility anticipated by March of 24. Updated construction cost estimates will be available June of 21, with refinements in September and December as the detailed design progresses. Public meetings would be held kind of in conjunction with an amendment to the environmental assessment that would be required due to the slight change from the last amendment, and that would take place in June of 21, and then again following completion of the detailed design and prior to construction around March of 22. So with that, based on our evaluation, staff is recommending award of the engineering contract to R.V. Anderson Associates Limited. And I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Todd. Councillor Pennell?
Thank you, through your worship. Good evening, Todd. I just have a question here. Back on an earlier page in the report, the 2020 preliminary design speaks of the project being approximately $50 million. And then when I read this, this tender, it's going to be 2.9 for the design of it. So is this 2.9 going to run into the $50 million, or do we not know, now that this is a whole different project or scope of work on a greenfield, do we even have an idea of what we think this is going to come in at?
We have some idea. It's a little vague right now, because as you said, there is a change in the approach to the project. But in the recommended proposal, they've suggested a savings of about $5 million below, and that's assuming that all of the preliminary costs that were put forth by the firm that did that preliminary design, assuming they're all correct. So they haven't really gone over those with a fine-tooth comb. So they've suggested, we interviewed the top 3 firms, and that was kind of a question that came up, and they suggested that $5 million just in the process itself over a retrofit scenario, and possibly other cost-saving measures. So I think we're still looking probably in the neighborhood of $40 million anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions? Boy, that was easy. You have a recommendation before you that council receive for information, as well as awarding to, council approves the award of contract in detail, for detailed design and construction contract administration for the upgrades to R.B. Anderson and Associates for the sum of $2,968,330, excluding HST, and further the council authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute the contract with R.B. Anderson Associate Limited on behalf of the corporation of the town of Greater Napanee. Council's wishes, moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Norrie. Further comments or questions? Councillor Canal.
Thank you, Mayor. One question I should ask, do we have the money? Do we have that 2.9 million? Is it put away somewhere? Why is everyone laughing?
Yeah. Mr. Dauber, do we have that?
If, and correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but I believe that even some of the engineering fees are part of that 14 million that we've been awarded as far as the funding goes. We do have a fairly healthy reserve with utilities right now, as well as impost fees that we could draw upon. And then once the invoices come in, we would submit them for reimbursement from the province to draw on that 14 million that we've been allotted.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I have a mover and a seconder, and we have the money. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. And again, kudos, of course, to Peter and Todd for moving this forward. It's a very important project to us for future development. 11.8, financial services. Paul, you're up again. Please.
So I thought I'd preemptively come up because I expect a few questions on this. As the report is fairly clear, the second phase for the Safe Restart is out. The parameters of what we're able to apply for. I've given a bit of a brief overview of exactly what we can apply for and how we can apply for it. But we do require a council resolution. So I'm looking for a council resolution tonight, which is fairly simple. It's just a resolution that I can go ahead and apply for it. We need to give them our copy of our 2020 operating budget, our Q3 actuals, and then our projections for 2020. So I'm just about 95% complete wrapping up the actuals for 2019 and putting the projections on. I should have that done by the end of the week. So we're in good shape to fill this out. I'm not sure if council's ever spent any time looking at our financial information return on the ministry's website, but it's a very specific way that all municipalities fill out a lot of different portions, including reserves, some of the information like how many kilometers of road, but there's a specific portion with revenues and expenses. And it looks at a very comparable way from one municipality to another. The way that the application is set up is very much in this form, and they're really looking at budgets. What is your budget compared to what you've actually spent? So that's why I mentioned in there that there's a possibility that some of our extra expenses that we've incurred might not be eligible. For instance, as we've been tracking COVID expenses, one of the large pieces would be some salaries as we've redirected folks to different activities and very COVID-specific activities. But really what they're going to be looking at is how is that compared to budget. And at this point, outside of some of the emergency services, there's not a lot of overtime. So because of the fact that it's still within budget, anything that's within the budget probably wouldn't qualify. However, it does look like we do have a good chance with some of our lost revenues. As I mentioned there, 750,000 is, I've just rounded it out, but about 725 is really between waste management and recreation. So we do have a good chance of being able to claim some of that. So I just open it up to council questions.
Okay. Any questions of Paul on this report? Yep, Councillor McCormack?
I was just gonna say that we should go ahead with it.
Okay, so you're making the motion then?
Yes, your worship.
To apply, seconded by Councillor Norrie. No further comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, Paul. 11.9, Community and Corporate Services, Assumption Process for Riverside and Riverview Cemeteries. Mr. Zetterberg.
Your worship, I'm hoping that council views this as a little bit of a housekeeping report. The previous resolution by council was to proceed with the assumption of the two cemeteries and give authorization to the mayor and the clerk to execute any documents required. However, our legal counsel and the BAO required something a little more specific than that resolution in giving them authorization to file an application with the Superior Court and also to create a reference plan for Riverview Cemetery. And also too, I took the chance to, in the report, to give a little bit of an update on the current situation with the cemeteries.
Any questions of Brent regarding the cemeteries? It's certainly been a vast improvement. I get lots and lots of compliments, even though I know it's added a fairly hefty work burden to your office for it. I know that everyone in the office speaks highly of the fact that we're able to do something with these, and certainly the public does as well. They do give us the odd complaint too, but that's there's nothing we can do about that. Is this, I need to know, council, what your wishes are here. It needs to be organized, it needs to be legal, and it looks like we've got them.
So moved.
So, okay, move staff recommendation, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kaiser. Comments or questions? Yep, Councillor Pennell?
Through you, Mayor, when I was looking, this is just a comment, when I was looking this up, I noticed that there is a survey on Riverview, but not on that there's a survey on Riverside, but not on Riverview. So that's just in case people want to know why we need a survey on this.
Yeah. It's amazing. I know that a lot of us haven't been in a lot of the buildings, but if you do get a chance to go into 12 Market and see the seconded office that's got maps all up over it, looks like subdivisions. They're not subdivisions. They're very tiny little subdivisions, but it is. Yeah, it is rather interesting, and plans to expand too, which is good. So I have a mover and a seconder. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment, and I guess thanks on behalf of the community, but kudos too to Mr. Zetterberg and his whole team. But I do believe that if it hadn't been for Brant's personal interest and dedication to this project alone, we wouldn't have been as successful and as fluid with the overtaking as we have been. And so thanks to Mr. Zetterberg and then all of his staff underneath him that took that on.
Yeah, kudos. I'm sure that all of council would echo that. It's rather a daunting job digging up all that information. Oh, sorry.
Did you say daunting or haunting?
All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Community and Corporate Services, bylaw to regulate the feeding of wildlife, the update. So you've got a recommendation that council receives for information, the bylaw to regulate, and further that council provide direction regarding where we want to go from there. Of course, the intention was to try and protect residents in Ward 4, which was done and done well. But I guess now what we might want to look at is have we covered or not covered everything to make sure. I know there was some kickback, but once people looked into it, they found that it probably was in good shape. But I'm going to leave it open to comments from here. Yeah, Councillor Norrie?
Yeah, I guess I'll start because I started this whole thing. Everybody knows the history, and since then there's been other complaints from other areas. But in regards to all that in social media, This bylaw was written to be a complaint-generated bylaw, not for our one and only bylaw officer to stand behind a tree and jump out and charge someone for throwing bread down. That's just to stop a couple of the comments. But there is sections in there under feeding that covers hunters. You could even add something in any other lawful organization and leave it at that, and that would probably cover it. What should I say? That's all. I'll just say it. It's a discretionary complaint bylaw, and the discretion is up to our bylaw officer, who's very capable, and he looks at the complaints. And example I'll give, who in this room drives the speed limit? Nobody. But does everybody get a ticket every time they go over the speed limit? No. Discretion and complaint driven, i.e. school zones. And that's all this is. It's just another tool on the belt. And that was one bad area that something went on for 8 years. And it's going on, but not as bad, and the complaints are going in again. And like I say, there are 2 others. But then it should just be filed away until something happens. And as far as Mrs. Meach, no, he's not going to charge her for helping those injured animals or injured birds.
And she's very aware of that.
The interesting thing from the M&R, Ministry of Natural Resources, consequences of feeding wildlife. Feeding wildlife animals may do more harm than good. And I'll just leave it at that. But their whole website explains it, and the bylaw is based on that. But again, it's discretion and complaint driven, that's all.
Yeah. Deputy Mayor Kaiser?
Thank you. I absolutely respect that it is complaint driven, but the perception for the individual who may choose to do it may be that it is unlawful, and that they're breaking a law to do it, and that may be enough to deter them from what they used to enjoy doing. One of the thoughts that came to me in this process was to look at what we did with our discharge of firearms bylaw a number of years ago, which was to simply draw a boundary around the the serviced area of the municipality, which is to say the area of the highest density, no large green fields, that it was basically a residential areas only, and that would say that then the wide expanse of rural areas, forested areas are fair game. And that would be a very simple amendment, I would suggest, to cover off adequately dealing with the concern that generated the discussion in the first place, and dealing with all the backlash that we got from the community.
You wish to make that by way of motion?
I would suggest wording that we have in the previous bylaw, that we could simply interject similar wording into this one to cover off the issue, I think, adequately.
Okay. So you're making that by way of motion?
I did.
To add to it?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Seconded by? Councillor Pennell? Comments, questions?
Just a question.
Mm-hmm.
Your Worship, what were what was the narrative of the complaints regarding the bylaw, apart from the Wildlife Center and others? I mean, it's...
And I don't think that the Wildlife Center had complaints, because she knew that she was covered right off the bat. What she was concerned about is every year in certain portions of the river where the current is, she will get, and some of them would be in the serviced area, and one of them right at the bottom of the falls, there would get to be ducks and geese frozen in.
Mm-hmm.
She does try to make sure that they get corn, and then I've even seen her down there pounding the ice, or she and her helpers, to get it out. So she just wanted to make sure she wasn't going to be chased by the bylaw officer. She's pretty well covered because of her licensing. So, okay, yeah. Councillor Richardson?
Yeah, I was going to say that, Your Worship. In perusing the Game and Fish Act, which is a provincial statute, she's covered.
Yep.
So that's not an issue, and it actually addresses a lot of the, it differentiates between feeding animals and baiting animals, baiting animals for hunting. So that whole issue that sort of arose is also covered. So the Game and Fish Act really protects, or because it's an upper level statute from our bylaw, looks after a lot of the complaints that we've had on it.
So we do have a motion on, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to suggest that we could maybe fine tune it as creating a nuisance. And as Councillor Norrie said, it's a matter of discretion. So if you're creating a nuisance by what you're doing, that the bylaw officer would have the the discretion to lay charges accordingly. Because we might not cover everything, but you don't want to give just a free hand, go completely in the other direction. So if the Wildlife Center under their licensing is exempt from the bylaw,
Yeah.
and any other legal agency would be under the same umbrella.
Yeah,
But-
kitten rescues and cat
I
rescues.
mean, all of a
and
sudden,
so on.
somebody decides they're gonna feed the pigeons around town hall, and next thing you know, you've got a problem with pigeons, and we haven't identified that. Well, it should be at the discretion of the bylaw officer if they're creating a nuisance to be able to lay a charge. Just an idea.
So you've got to decide, is that, we do have a motion on the books that says within the serviced area, which is what the discharge of firearm bylaw is. So we do have a motion sitting on the floor right now with a mover and a seconder. Councillor Pinal.
Through your worship, this, is the line's gonna be the same in your motion as the discharge bylaw? You'd make them the same, would you?
The discharge bylaw covers the serviced area even as it expands, because of course, even when we made that part of areas that are now serviced, say within the Donhart subdivision that weren't serviced before, would be. So we did it with that. And Susan, jump in here anytime that you want, but am I right? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Doesn't always happen.
I just wanna make sure that we get this right, as I said I wasn't gonna say it, but I'm gonna say it. I did try to slow this down before it was passed, and here we are now doing it again. And I just want to make sure that we get the terminology, and no disrespect to you, sir, I just want to get this done right. And I agree with, if we're down Conservation Park and there's a chip truck there and someone throws a french fry, you know what's going to happen. But if I'm sitting on the back of my boat with a piece of bread feeding the fish, and somebody complains or someone's having a bad day, I could get a ticket for that. So I just want to make sure that we get the terminology right this time. And I'm thinking that maybe we should ask for something to come back before we approve it, that's all. I don't.
Just to clarify, if you don't mind, worship, the discharge area would be what, more like in town? Is that what we're?
Well, it's the serviced area, so anywhere there's water and sewer.
All right, so if somebody at Pickerel Park decided they were gonna start feeding the raccoons,
Have
know,
at her.
right, that's not in the discharge area, so maybe that's where I'm trying to make the point that if we could have something that gives discretion to
That
the
says
bylaw
it's a
officer, if it's a nuisance, somebody's creating a nuisance by feeding animals and causing a problem.
Okay, well, I know that certainly Mr. Cowrie and probably Susan have taken notes on this, so what we might better do is ask for a report to come back so that it is fulsome and we're hitting everything, so that we're not having to do it constantly.
Yep.
Which we did with the discharge firearm. It was a while getting tweaked to the full extent.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so you withdraw the motion for the
Yep.
time being. Who was
And
the seconder?
instead move to direct.
Yep. Move to direct staff to come forward with information, maybe not at the next council meeting, but at the one after that. Would that be better timing?
In 2020?
Let's try for it.
In 2020, okay, we'll give you in 2020 then.
Thank you.
Okay, is that good with everybody then? So moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by, so Susan, you have what you need. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, thank you very much. CAO staff, BIP viewpoints, information and perspectives focus group, first meeting. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep this
Can
brief.
you make sure, Alan, that you pull your, yeah, thank you, just so that the people
That's okay.
that are listening, please and thank you.
Thank you. So we did manage to have a meeting on, actually, we had two of them because the first one wasn't long enough. I want to thank the staff that participated in this program, and the purpose is to collect viewpoints, information, and perspectives from staff in order to share them with council. The background information is all in the notes for you. Our CAO had put together a sample agenda, not because we necessarily had to follow it, but just to get the thought process going so that when staff came to the first meeting, we had something to talk about. There were a couple of topics that quickly came to light, and of course, COVID was one. Interestingly enough, between the time we had our first meeting on September 29th and today, COVID has changed for us again. And we have now, in Ontario, we have communities in red zones. So staff was particularly interested in having a weekly Zoom meeting set up, just 10 minutes a week, update everybody so that managers and staff are on the same page. They're all getting their information from the same place. Some people want to know all of the changes that are coming and what the possibilities are. Other people would rather just say, I've had enough of this and I just want to sit down and do my work. So doing something like this through Zoom allows everyone to choose their own level of involvement, whether they want to have a discussion afterwards about anything or just listen to the new information or just be aware of what might be coming. This is not to promote policy or make changes in that regard. It's just to keep everyone on the same page with information. One of the other discussions that we had was with regard to childcare issues, as our Premier talks about moving backwards in levels. That's one of the last things that came through was childcare was reinstated, and a lot of people have precarious childcare situations right now. So if we have to move back, what are we going to do to make sure that our staff can continue to work and that their childcare issues are managed? It's a lot of what ifs. If this happens, how can I be sure that the town of Greater Napanee, as my employer, will make sure that I can continue to do my job? So that's the main focus for the weekly Zoom meetings, and I think Brianna is going to be taking care of that. Thank you very much. So the second theme we talked about was how job descriptions get reviewed, and this was brought up because a lot of people felt it didn't happen, and they were surprised to find out that there is, in the employment contracts, there is a semi-annual performance appraisal to be held with managers. And unfortunately, the perception of this was a performance appraisal as, are you doing a good job or are you not doing a good job? When in fact, the intent was more to reflect the, how is the job description you have actually matching up with the work that you do? Are there discrepancies between the two? Is there language that needs to be made better? And I think everyone agreed that the first renaming these semi-annual meetings between management and staff would go a long way in engaging that conversation in a better manner. Staff also provided feedback on the ethics policy, and they were very pleased with how that was going to be rolled out over the next period of time. Then unfortunately I had to leave. So we had another meeting. And this one really spoke to the heart of staff's concerns. It's social media can be our best friend, and it can be, as we all know, it can be our worst enemy. And all staff are under restrictions as municipal employees, that they're unable to correct misinformation that they see on social media. They're unable to counteract negative comments that are made because they have restrictions placed on them as employees of the town of Greater Napanee. So then we talked about how can that be counterbalanced? How can we as a council, managers, how can we work to reinforce the positive work that's done in our community? The excellent programs that are managed by our staff, and how can we change the conversation? How can we have good news stories instead of bad news stories? COVID has done nothing over the past year, if not given many people too much time to sit at home and think about things to complain about. So how can we turn this conversation around? There's a lot of good stories about what happens in our community. There's a lot of people who not just do their jobs, but go up and above what they need to do. There are people who just show up for work every day regardless of what their challenges are at home, and they give it their all. And sometimes we just need to say thank you and to appreciate the work that they do. Staff was not asking us to do that. Staff was asking us just to remember the positive that happens in this community and how can we change that conversation. So that was really enlightening. And I felt very badly for the staff that feel that they've been beat up in social media, and whether it's personal attacks or attacks on the work they do for their departments, that there is negativity within our community that sometimes is not deserved. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. You have to own your mistakes when you make them. But nobody deserves to be harassed and abused in social media to the point where they don't want to come to work. So it has definitely had an impact on morale. So that is something that we are going to take forward and continue discussions on. There were no time frames or recommendations made coming out of this. And there is, hopefully there will be a staff committee formed to collect some good news items, and that will help to change the conversation that happens. The next meeting is set for December. There is not a definite date set yet. Hopefully we'll have some additional staff people participate, and it is just about having a conversation and bringing forward a different perspective. So I hope, does anybody have questions?
Yeah, Councillor Pennell?
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Ellen. I'm just wondering, when you said more staff participate, how many were you expecting, and how many did you have?
Since it was the first meeting, we were hoping not to have more than 6, and we didn't. And I could tell you who was there, but really the point is not who was there, but about the conversation that was had. And when I say more staff, it's not because we wouldn't want the same people to come again, but just that there would be more people participating in the conversation. And I think, Ray, did we say 10 would be kind of the max?
Yeah, there's 11 work sites that could be represented at any particular meeting.
Yeah.
But there's, and that would include a management representative, but I think based on like the conversation, 10 would be the most you could handle in a morning, probably.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, there was some great conversations.
Did I see your hand up, Councillor McCormick?
That was my question.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Certainly sounds like it was.
It was a good beginning.
Yeah, no, certainly a good beginning and a different perspective, and how right they are about social media. And they can't talk back.
No, their hands are tied.
Just for council's information, all of the items that were discussed on this report are also on the senior management agenda for the morning.
Good.
So.
Well, thanks, Ellen, and thanks, Ray. That's, it sounds like the initiative certainly will be taking off. So I would entertain a motion to note and receive Ellen and Ray's report, please. Moved by Councillor McCormick, seconded by Councillor Pennell. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Bylaws, bylaw number 2020-0061, official plan amendment, PLOPMA 2020-007, first and second reading. Councillor Richardson, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Bylaw number 2020-0062, zoning bylaw amendment, PLZACO 2020-008, first and second reading. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Pennell, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Any new business? Any notices of motion? Any statements by members? Councillor McCormick.
I hate to henpeck, but this last Friday, we weren't notified of who was on call. And if we could find a way to designate somebody, not you, CAO, because you have your plates full, right? But maybe there's a staff member who could, every Friday, send out to council the names and phone numbers, rather than having to look up the number. I'd appreciate it, right? The cell number. And just as a regular thing on Friday, so we know if there's something that comes up and we need to get a hold of somebody, who the 1 or 2 people are.
Yeah, this Friday was just a little
I
hairy,
know,
so
I know.
I know, and I'm not backing off from it. I think that, what I would ask council's indulgence in is the fact that it's great to give out phone numbers, but we need to know that, what things we would be phoning on. Emergencies, on an on-call weekend or one thing, but we have certain employees that as soon as they are called, there's a 3.5 hour or 6 hour or whatever it is charge that comes out, maybe even to just have them look at something. So I think we need to have a discussion on what we consider. I thoroughly agree, because if I don't have who's on call, I know who I call. And I think we need to get around that. But it's just a process, John, that we need to make sure that we've got it, and what we would be calling them for. I'm sure that there isn't a council member here, at least I sure hope there isn't, that would call to say there's a dead raccoon on South Shore Road, can you come and get it off?
Madam.
But those are the kind of things, sorry.
No, that's okay, Madam Mayor. If, because I want to assure council it has not been forgotten. In fact, at our very last senior management meeting, I think a very good solution was put forward. And what that actually is that we're investigating right now is a single number that this council can call, and they will be directed to the right person. And the way that will work is through a app system that exists where the on-call person just touches the app and says it automatically puts them as the person on call. And so that, because one of the things that we find happen that was explained very thoroughly when we discussed this at the senior management meeting is that every once in a while, for personal reasons, at the last minute, people will trade off their on-call with another person to make sure the municipality is covered, but something happens suddenly and they need somebody to trade off, and all of a sudden, on Friday night, we provided one name and it's actually another name because they've had to trade off at the last minute to make things work. And so what this solution would be a single number that would, you just phone that number, you'd say, this is what I'm looking for, and you'd be directed to the on-call person for that purpose. And we're hoping that'll be in shortly. We're just trying to finalize the details.
Yeah, thank you. Ray explains it a whole lot better.
It's kind of like euchre when, who dealt last?
That's right. Yeah, what's Trump? Oh, no, that's a bad thing to say out loud now. Sorry.
Nope, that's-
Any further statements by members? I'll go to Deputy Mayor Kaiser, and then I'll go to you, Terry.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Actually, I wanted to sort of jump on the tail end of what John was asking about, and I appreciate what our senior management team has come up with, because I was hoping for exactly that. But on that note, on Sunday, I was called or emailed by a neighbor resident about a road sign issue, and it's Sunday morning on a long weekend, but I don't want to forget, so I sent an email to Mr. Dwyer and Mr. Taylor, and I got a response from Mr. Taylor within an hour at about 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and I thought, he didn't have to do that. I certainly wasn't hoping to hear from him before a normal work day, but he did. So kudos to that individual, and that's kind of a normal happening, but I appreciate the idea of having a phone number and possibly also an email that would do the same thing, that we could do that. And I think the email would be a good thing because it gives that level of tracking, and maybe more than one person could be hit by the email automatically, so that you get that oversight, management, whatever that could be there. So,
That's good.
and it also doesn't require actually having somebody answer in the moment. They could answer at a more timely opportunity.
Any other statements by members? You sure, Terry? I was sure you had your hand up.
Well, I could think of something if you want, Your Worship.
Well, no, because I've got one ahead of you. So, last words mine? Couple of things. I want to thank the firefighters for missing all their turkey suppers again. It was sure a busy weekend, and the emails were flying this morning. Kudos to, we had Tyne-the-Nega, we had Stone Mills, we had Loyalist, and ourselves. Is that right, Chief? We had everybody in on everything yesterday, and it's just amazing how smoothly it goes to have that mutual aid. So if there is nothing further, you're going to have to indulge me here for a minute. As predicted, the second wave of COVID-19 has started and has not nearly peaked. We should be more than thankful that within our area to this point we've stayed within stage 3. and that even though our numbers have soared and expected to climb even more dramatically, we are not facing the problems of other areas. This morning, Tri-County Transportation, for the 5th day in a row, announced numerous bus cancellations due to lack of drivers. How does this fit into our operations? This council made the decision on September the 9th to lift the state of emergency. Statements made by council members were that they felt that the worst part was past, so there was no monetary gain or support to be made while staying under the state of emergency, and that they wanted to alter the method of communication and participation of council and the MECG so that they would be more aware of what was being done during the state of emergency. The declaration of authority had long since been lifted. Opening and closing of landfills, boat launches, offices, and service had all been brought forward to council for both information and final decision. Our largest threat now, which has been pointed out to us by our insurance carrier, Cowan Insurance, is with the likely loss of staff due to contact of not just COVID, but the combination of flu and many other things, the spread through schools, children, elderly. Also to be considered the accommodations that may need to be made for staff in the care of both children and elderly, which again could draw short to meet minimum maintenance standards in public works, including facilities, fire and emergency services, as well as utilities. Not being able to meet those standards can put the municipality in a position of negligent liability. Liability that could tie up human and monetary resources for years. Would we be covered by insurance? Yes, perhaps, but our deductibles and premiums would climb to a level that could be unaffordable and take away from revenues that could be much more wisely spent. As you know, we have a road maintenance agreement with the county and the 4 lower tiers, for which we are compensated, and it has been discussed by the TAC committee as to the ability of all lower tiers to provide minimum standards if they are experiencing outbreaks with staff or accommodations related to the outbreak. We are the only lower tier that is not currently in a state of emergency. A few short points to emphasize what I'm about to say. A report from our insurance provider suggests the same. Municipalities who have either lifted or in fact never declared are now doing so with winter coming and the threat of non-coverage for minimum maintenance standards. Alternate staff work location agreements may be needed if numbers persist to protect service provision. Agreements are being discussed between municipalities to provide mutual aid in public work services. Staff are requesting family care alternatives to be investigated. Changes to council communication during an emergency of this length need to be investigated, including participation or immediate virtual updates as required, and communication releases of council question and answer periods for the public to see all the efforts that are being made forward to protect. Regular staff check-in meetings are being discussed for staff to get updates on COVID status and regulation or operating changes. Finance is still recording and tracking all costs and revenue losses from our pandemic response. New information packages are being developed for staff on procedures that will be needed for timesheets and general ledger recording accuracy. Staff have established a supply of PPE, but we need to make sure that that's always there. The service level chart established during the declared emergency is being reviewed for required updates. With the implementation of technology and changes to the council procedural bylaw, delegation of authority to staff is not anticipated to be required. When we first entered into a state of emergency, there was a chart developed, and it will be reviewed to guide us through the next stage. Details of the first MECG meeting will be circulated to council so that they will be aware with input as to times, frequency, and content. This will make for a beneficial tool for council and staff to share concerns while updating progress. I have said from the beginning, our emergency management system was not designed for a long pandemic. It was meant more for something short-term. Get things operational and go forward. The emergencies such as fire, earthquake, derailment. I believe it is time to reinstate the state of emergency for the protection of our residents, for the protection of our municipality, and to make sure that we do what we were elected for. To do everything in our power to make sure that this is done and done quickly. It also will stay in step with the other lower tiers and our partners in KFL&A as they remain in the state. State of emergency is never meant to do anything but protect. The declaration is not one that's meant to restrict or demand. All that is done by the health unit under their section 22, and they out-trump us. Tomorrow morning I will be signing the state of emergency declaration to do just that. I would hope that each and every council member would take part in keeping our community protected. Everyone has a role to play in protecting our residents and the businesses. The federal and provincial government have theirs, the health unit has theirs, and we must make sure that we pick up the slack to protect the municipality against liability and to strive to supply services. The declaration is and never has been to usurp council of their duties and input, as many of you feel. It is to help us to fulfill our obligations. So tomorrow morning I will be signing a new state of emergency, which I would hope would stay in place with all kinds of communication with all of you, whether you would even be part of the MECG, as was your wishes before. But if we cannot provide minimum maintenance standards, we could put the municipality at a great liability risk, and I as mayor cannot risk that, and I believe that none of you should either. Any further statements by members? If not, I need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act in order to firstly adopt closed session minutes from September the 22nd, October the 1st, and October the 8th. Secondly, to discuss two matters relating to commercial and financial information supplied in confidence to the municipality, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of an organization. And thirdly, to discuss personnel matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor McCormack, sorry. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Everybody want a bit of a break? Yeah, okay.